The needle slipped through Gareth Quinn's fingers for the third time that morning, and he cursed under his breath as thread unspooled across the worn wooden table like a snake fleeing its burrow. His calloused hands, scarred from years wielding a sword in the border wars, were utterly useless when it came to the delicate work of mending fabric. The torn military coat lay before him like a monument to his failures, the ragged gash along the shoulder mocking every clumsy attempt he had made to repair it. It was the only coat he owned that still held any warmth, and winter was creeping closer to his isolated homestead with each passing day. He lived alone now, had done so for the better part of 2 years since returning from the wars that had raged along the frontier between human settlements and orc territories. The small farmstead he had inherited from his father sat nestled in a valley where the rolling hills gave way to darker, wilder forests. It was far enough from the nearest village that visitors were rare, which suited Gareth just fine. He had seen enough of people, enough of violence, enough of everything during those brutal years of fighting. All he wanted was peace, solitude, and the simple rhythm of tending crops and livestock. But peace did not mend torn coats, and solitude meant there was no one to ask for help with tasks his soldiers' hands could not manage. Gareth stood abruptly, scraping his chair against the floorboards, and walked to the window. Outside, autumn leaves danced in the wind, gold and crimson against the gray sky. The small vegetable garden he had planted showed signs of neglect, weeds creeping between the rows of turnips and potatoes. His shoulder ached, the old wound that had sent him home from the war throbbing in the cold weather. That same injury had torn his coat when he had fallen against a fence post last week, trying to repair a broken gate. A sound outside made him freeze. Not the usual rustle of wind or the bleating of his 3 scraggly sheep. This was footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching through the fallen leaves. Gareth's hand moved instinctively to where his sword would have hung at his belt, but he wore no weapon inside his own home. His heart hammered as he pressed himself against the wall beside the window, peering out cautiously. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. An orc woman stood in his yard, her green skin vivid against the muted autumn colors. She was tall, perhaps only a hand's breadth shorter than his own 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a muscular build that spoke of strength and hard labor. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and she wore simple traveling clothes, brown leather trousers and a thick wool tunic that had seen better days. 2 small tusks curved upward from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears twitched as she scanned the homestead with dark, intelligent eyes. Gareth's first instinct was fear, the visceral reaction drilled into him by years of war. Orcs were the enemy. Orcs were dangerous. But this woman carried no weapon that he could see, only a large pack slung over her shoulders that looked heavy enough to make even her strong frame lean slightly to one side. She did not move like a warrior approaching a target. She moved like someone exhausted, her steps slow and careful as if each one required conscious effort. He watched as she walked closer to his cottage, and it was then that he noticed the limp in her gait, the way she favored her left leg. She stopped about 20 paces from his door and stood there, swaying slightly. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she raised her hand as if to knock, seemed to think better of it, and lowered it again. She took a step back, then forward again, clearly uncertain. Gareth's military training warred with something else inside him, something that had been buried beneath years of violence but not entirely extinguished. She was alone, injured and clearly in need of help. He thought of the torn coat on his table, of his own struggles, and made a decision that would change everything. He opened the door before she could knock. The orc woman's head snapped up, and he saw genuine fear flash across her face. Her hand moved to her pack, defensive but not aggressive. They stood there staring at each other, human and orc, former enemies meeting in a lonely valley far from the lines that had once divided them. "I mean no harm," she said quickly, her voice deeper than a human woman's but clear and careful. Her accent was thick, rolling the consonants in a way that marked her as coming from the northern clans. "I am lost. I need to reach the trading post at Millbrook. Can you tell me which direction?" Gareth studied her face, looking for deception, but found only weariness and pain. "Millbrook is 2 days' walk north," he said slowly. "But you will not make it in your condition. You are injured." She stiffened, pride flashing in her dark eyes. "I can walk, perhaps, but you will collapse before nightfall." He did not know why he was saying this, why he was not simply pointing her in the right direction and closing the door. "There is a storm coming. The sky has that look." As if to confirm his words, a gust of cold wind swept through the yard, stirring leaves into small whirlwinds. The orc woman shivered, though she tried to hide it. Gareth saw her jaw tighten, saw the conflict playing across her features. She did not want to ask for help, especially not from a human. "I have a barn," Gareth heard himself say. "Dry hay. You could rest there until the storm passes." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You would allow an orc to shelter on your land?" "I would allow an injured traveler to avoid freezing to death," he replied, more gruffly than he intended. "The barn is warm enough. There is a well for water, but I will not force you. Go if you wish." He started to close the door, half expecting her to turn and limp away into the approaching storm. Instead, she spoke again, her voice softer. "Why would you help me? Your people and mine have been at war." Gareth paused, his hand on the door frame. He thought of the battles he had fought, the orc warriors he had killed, the human friends he had lost. He thought of the senselessness of it all, the way war reduced people to nothing more than the color of their skin or the shape of their ears. "The war is over," he said quietly. "And I am tired of fighting." Something shifted in her expression, a tiny crack in the defensive wall she had built around herself. She nodded slowly, then winced as the movement jarred her injured leg. "I accept your offer," she said. "For the barn, I will not trouble you beyond that." Gareth pointed to the weathered structure across the yard. "The door does not lock. Help yourself. There are blankets in the chest near the back." She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect that surprised him. "Thank you. I am Thura." "Gareth," he replied, then closed the door before he could second-guess his decision. He returned to the table and his abandoned sewing project, but found it impossible to concentrate. His mind kept returning to the orc woman, Thura, settling into his barn. What had possessed him to offer shelter to someone who, just 2 years ago, he would have fought on sight? The war might be officially over, but the hatred and fear it had bred ran deep. If anyone from the village learned he was harboring an orc, even temporarily, there would be consequences. But the village was 5 miles away, and he rarely went there anyway. The other farmers in the valley avoided him, uncomfortable with his war-damaged shoulder and the dark moods that sometimes overtook him. He was already an outsider. What difference would one more transgression make? The afternoon wore on, and the promised storm arrived with a vengeance. Rain lashed against the windows, driven by howling wind that rattled the shutters. Gareth prepared a simple dinner of bread and stew, eating mechanically while thunder rolled across the valley. He wondered if Thura was warm enough in the barn, if the roof was leaking the way it sometimes did in heavy rain. He told himself it was not his concern, that he had offered what hospitality he could without inviting danger into his home. But when the storm showed no signs of abating after dark, and the temperature dropped sharply enough that frost formed on the inside of his windows, Gareth found himself pulling on his torn coat and lighting a lantern. He told himself he was just checking on the livestock, making sure the sheep had not panicked and injured themselves. It had nothing to do with the injured orc woman sheltering in his barn. The wind nearly tore the cottage door from his hands when he opened it. Rain soaked through his coat instantly, the torn shoulder letting in streams of icy water. He cursed and held the lantern high, making his way carefully across the muddy yard. The barn door was closed, which was good. He pushed it open and stepped inside, shaking water from his hair. Thura sat in the corner on a pile of hay, wrapped in one of his old blankets. She looked up sharply when he entered, her body tensing as if ready to spring into action despite her injury. The lantern light caught her face, highlighting the strong planes of her cheeks and the wary intelligence in her eyes. "The sheep," Gareth said by way of explanation, though the sheep were clearly huddled together on the other side of the barn, perfectly fine. Thura's gaze flicked to the animals, then back to him. She said nothing, but he saw understanding in her expression. She knew he had come to check on her, not the livestock. "The roof is holding?" he asked, looking up at the rafters. "It is dry here," she replied carefully. "Thank you again for your kindness." Gareth noticed she was shivering despite the blanket, noticed the way she kept her injured leg stretched out in front of her. "That leg needs attention. It could become infected. I will tend to it when I reach Millbrook." Millbrook is 2 days away in good weather. This storm could last through tomorrow. By then, infection could set in. He did not know why he was arguing with her, why he cared whether an orc stranger lived or died. But the words kept coming. "I have medical supplies in the cottage. Basic field medicine from the war. Let me look at it." Thura's jaw tightened, her pride clearly warring with practical necessity. "I do not wish to impose further on your hospitality." "You are not imposing. I am offering." Gareth surprised himself with the firmness in his voice. "I have seen too many men lose limbs to infection because they were too stubborn to accept help." For a long moment, they regarded each other in the flickering lantern light. Then Thura sighed, a sound of reluctant surrender. "Very well," she said, "but I will not enter your home. Bring the supplies here if you wish to help." Gareth nodded and returned to the cottage, gathering bandages, a bottle of strong alcohol for cleaning wounds, and the salve he had made from herbs that grew wild near the stream. When he returned to the barn, Thura had pulled up the leg of her trousers to expose a nasty gash along her calf. The wound was several days old, clumsily bandaged with strips of cloth that were now soaked with rain and mud. He knelt beside her without a word, setting down the supplies and raising the lantern to get a better look. The cut was deep but clean, no signs of infection yet, though the edges were inflamed and angry. "What happened?" he asked as he began carefully removing the old bandages. Thura was silent for so long that he thought she would not answer. Then she spoke, her voice low. "I was attacked. 3 human men in the forest 2 days north of here. They saw me traveling alone and decided an orc woman would be easy prey." Gareth's hand stilled. "Did they did not succeed in whatever they planned," Thura interrupted, a hard edge to her voice. "I fought them off, but one had a knife. I was careless." He resumed cleaning the wound, his jaw tight with anger. Not at her, but at the men who had attacked her, at the world that made such violence possible. "I am sorry that happened to you," she laughed bitterly. You fought against my people for years. You killed orcs. Why should you care if a few humans attacked one of us?" The accusation stung because it was true. Gareth poured alcohol over the wound, and Thura hissed in pain but did not pull away. He worked in silence, cleaning the gash thoroughly before applying the herbal salve. "I did kill orcs during the war," he said finally. "I killed many of them." just as orc warriors killed many humans. We were all following orders, fighting for land and resources and things that seemed important at the time. He began wrapping clean bandages around her calf, his hands steady despite the tremor that sometimes plagued them. But the war is over, and I have had 2 years to think about what I did. To remember the faces of the enemies I killed and realize they were not so different from me. They had families, hopes, fears. They bled red just like I do. Thura was quiet, watching him work. When he finished tying off the bandage, she spoke softly. "You are not what I expected of humans." "What did you expect?" "Hatred. Violence. The men who attacked me called me monster, savage, demon spawn. They said orcs had no right to travel through human lands, that we should all be killed or driven back to our territories." Her hands clenched into fists. "I have heard such words all my life. I expected them from you as well." Gareth sat back on his heels, meeting her gaze. "I will not lie and say I welcome orcs with open arms. The war left scars that still ache. But you are one injured woman who asked for directions. You have done nothing to threaten me. Why should I treat you as an enemy?" "Because that is what we are," Thura said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "Your kind and mine, we have been enemies for generations. Then perhaps it is time for that to change." Gareth stood, gathering the medical supplies. "The bandage should be changed daily. Keep it clean and dry. If you see red streaks spreading from the wound or feel fever, that is infection. You will need stronger medicine than I can provide." Thura looked down at her newly bandaged leg, then back up at him. "Why are you doing this, truly? There must be a reason." Gareth considered the question. He thought about the nightmares that still woke him some nights, dreams of blood and screaming and the weight of bodies he had stepped over on battlefields. He thought about the emptiness of his life now, the way he drifted through days without purpose or connection. He thought about the torn coat on his table and his own inability to fix even the smallest things. "Because someone should," he said simply. "Someone should choose kindness instead of violence. Maybe if more people did, there would not have been a war in the first place." He left the barn before she could respond, returning to his cottage through the driving rain. Once inside, he stripped off his soaked coat and hung it by the fire to dry. His shoulder ached fiercely, and his hands shook as he prepared tea. He was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained by the simple act of helping another person. But there was something else too, something he had not felt in a long time. A tiny spark of warmth in the cold emptiness that had filled him since the war. It was not happiness exactly, but it was better than the numbness he had grown accustomed to. The storm raged through the night and into the next day, trapping Thura in the barn and Gareth in his cottage. He went out periodically to check on her and the animals, bringing water and some bread and cheese for her to eat. She accepted his offerings with quiet gratitude, and they exchanged few words beyond the necessities. But there was a shift in the way she looked at him, less wariness and more curiosity. On the second morning, the rain finally stopped, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. Gareth woke to weak sunlight streaming through his windows and the drip of water from the eaves. His first thought was that Thura would leave now, continue her journey to Millbrook. The realization brought an unexpected pang of disappointment. He was preparing breakfast when someone knocked on his cottage door. He opened it to find Thura standing there, her pack slung over one shoulder. She looked rested, the exhaustion that had marked her features when she first arrived now replaced with something more alert and alive. "I wish to thank you properly before I leave," she said. "Your kindness saved my life. I will not forget it." Gareth nodded, unsure what to say. "Your leg is well enough for travel. It will have to be. I have already imposed on your hospitality too long." She paused, her gaze dropping to the table visible through the open door. He followed her look and realized she was staring at his torn coat, still lying where he had left it days ago, needle and thread abandoned beside it. "You are trying to mend that?" she asked, something like surprise in her voice. "Trying being the operative word," Gareth said ruefully. "I have no skill with a needle, but it is my only warm coat and winter is coming." Thura was silent for a moment, then asked quietly, "May I see it?" He stepped aside, allowing her to enter the cottage. She set down her pack and approached the table, lifting the coat with gentle hands. Her fingers traced the ragged tear along the shoulder, then examined his clumsy attempts at repair. "This is soldier's work," she said. "Rough and careless. I was a soldier. Rough and careless describes most of what I do." The corner of her mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "I am a seamstress by trade. Before the war, my clan supplied clothing and armor repairs to the northern settlements. I know good stitching, and this is not it." Gareth felt heat rise to his face. "I am aware of my limitations." Thura looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Let me mend it for you, as payment for your kindness." "That is not necessary. I asked for nothing in return." "I know you did not, but I am offering nonetheless." She set the coat down and squared her shoulders. "I have little else to give, but this is something I can do well. Please. Let me help you as you helped me." There was pride in her request, a need to balance the scales between them. Gareth understood that need, the discomfort of being in someone's debt. He nodded slowly. "If you wish to. But you should rest your leg for another day at least before attempting the journey to Millbrook." "I cannot continue to impose." "You are not imposing," Gareth interrupted. "You are accepting offered hospitality. There is a difference." Thura studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "One more day, and I will mend your coat." She settled at the table, and Gareth watched in fascination as she pulled needle and thread from her pack. Her supplies were of far better quality than his crude attempts, the thread strong and even, the needles gleaming and sharp. She examined the torn coat again, then began to work with quick, confident movements. Gareth busied himself preparing breakfast, stealing glances at her as he cooked. Her hands moved with practiced grace, nothing like his own clumsy attempts. The needle dipped and rose in a steady rhythm, drawing the torn edges together with small, precise stitches that were nearly invisible. "How long have you been a seamstress?" he asked, curiosity overcoming his usual reticence. "Since I was a child. My mother taught me and her mother taught her. It is tradition in my family." Thura did not look up from her work, but her voice was less guarded than before. "We were known for quality work, respected even by humans who came to trade. Before the war, there was profit in such skills. And after the war," her hands stilled for a moment. "After the war, there is suspicion and fear. Human settlements will not trade with orcs anymore. My clan has suffered. That is why I travel to Millbrook, to see if the trading post there might accept our goods. It is far enough from the border that perhaps the war's hatred has not reached as deeply." Gareth brought bowls of porridge to the table, setting one beside her. She looked at it in surprise. "You do not have to feed me as well as shelter me," she said. "I was making it anyway. No point in eating alone when there is company." He sat across from her, stirring honey into his porridge. "Do you think they will trade with you in Millbrook?" Thura set aside the coat long enough to eat a few spoonfuls. "I do not know, but I must try. My clan depends on the income. Winter will be hard if we cannot sell our goods." They ate in silence for a while, and Gareth found himself studying her face when she was not looking. Without the hard edge of wariness, she was striking in a way he had not expected. Her features were strong and proud, her movements economical and graceful despite her size. There was intelligence in her eyes and something else too. Sadness, perhaps, or loneliness. He recognized it because he saw the same thing every time he looked in a mirror. "What did you do before the war?" Thura asked, breaking into his thoughts. "I was a farmer like my father. This land has been in my family for 3 generations." Gareth gestured to the window to the fields and forest beyond. "Then the war came and I was conscripted. I fought for 4 years before taking a blade to the shoulder. The wound never healed properly. They sent me home. And you returned to farming," I tried. "But the land suffered in my absence, and I lack the strength now to do all the work that needs doing." He flexed his left hand, feeling the familiar weakness in the shoulder above it. "I grow enough to feed myself, tend a few animals. It is not much of a life, but it is mine." Thura's gaze fell on his shoulder, and he wondered if she could tell which one was injured just by looking. "The wound still pains you. Every day, especially when the weather turns cold." He had never admitted that to anyone before, but somehow it seemed safe to tell her. "I have grown accustomed to it. You should not have to." Thura returned to her sewing, her voice thoughtful. "My clan has healers who work with old injuries, herbs and techniques passed down through generations." "Perhaps if you visited," she stopped abruptly, shaking her head. "Forgive me, that was presumptuous. A human would never be welcomed in an orc settlement, just as I would not be welcomed in your village." "No," Gareth agreed quietly. "I suppose they would not welcome me. Just as my neighbors would drive you out with pitchforks if they knew you were here. Then we are both outcasts in our own ways." Thura's needle moved steadily, drawing the fabric together. "You for showing kindness to an enemy, me for accepting it." They worked in companionable silence after that, Thura with her sewing and Gareth with small tasks around the cottage. He repaired a loose hinge on a cabinet, mended a crack in the windowsill with fresh putty, swept the floor. Simple, mindless work that kept his hands busy while his mind wandered. He found himself intensely aware of Thura's presence, the quiet sounds of her breathing and the rustle of fabric as she worked. It had been so long since another person shared this space with him that it felt almost dreamlike. By midday, she had finished the coat. Gareth examined her work with genuine amazement. The tear was completely invisible, the stitches so fine and even that he could not tell where the original fabric ended and the repair began. "This is masterwork," he said honestly. "I have never seen better." Thura ducked her head, but he caught the pleased expression that crossed her face. "It is what I do, what I am good at." She stood, testing her weight on her injured leg. There was still a slight limp, but she moved more easily than before. "I should go now. I have imposed long enough." "Stay," Gareth said, the word escaping before he could think about it. When Thura looked at him in surprise, he scrambled for justification. "Another night at least. Make sure the leg is truly healed before you attempt a 2-day journey. If the wound reopens, you could be in serious danger." "I have taken enough of your kindness." "Then stay and work for it. I have other things that need mending." He went to a chest in the corner and pulled out shirts with torn seams, trousers with holes in the knees, a blanket that had come unstitched along one edge. "These have been sitting for months because I cannot repair them myself. If you mended them, I would consider it fair payment for food and shelter." Thura looked at the pile of damaged clothing, then at him. He could see her working through the decision, weighing pride against practicality. Finally, she nodded. "One more night. I will mend what I can." Relief flooded through Gareth, though he did not examine too closely why the thought of her leaving had bothered him so much. They settled into an easy routine, Thura at the table with her sewing and Gareth preparing a simple lunch of bread and cold meat from the smokehouse. When he brought the food to the table, she was examining one of his shirts with a critical eye. "You are very hard on your clothes," she observed. "These tears are from rough work, not normal wear." I am one man doing the work of three, Gareth said defensively. Things get damaged. I am not criticizing, only observing. She bit off a thread and set the shirt aside. If you had help with the farm work, your clothes would last longer. If I had help with the farm work, I would have to talk to people regularly. I prefer the solitude. Thura gave him a searching look. Do you, truly? Or have you simply grown accustomed to loneliness? The question struck deeper than Gareth expected. He sat down heavily, suddenly unwilling to meet her gaze. What difference does it make? People from the village want nothing to do with a broken soldier who cannot even work his own land properly. I am an embarrassment to them, a reminder of what the war cost. You are not broken, Thura said firmly. You are injured. There is a difference. Try telling that to my shoulder when I can barely lift a water bucket. Have you truly tried? Or have you simply accepted the limitation? Anger flared in Gareth's chest. You know nothing about it. You have not lived with constant pain, with the knowledge that your body will never work the way it once did. Have I not? Thura's voice was sharp now. She set down the sewing and pulled up her sleeve, revealing a network of scars along her forearm. I took an axe blade here during a raid on my village. I was 15. The healers said I would never regain full use of the arm, that the muscles were too damaged. Do you know what I did? I worked the arm every single day, pushing through pain until I could barely stand it. It took 2 years, but I regained almost all the strength, not because I accepted the limitation, but because I refused to. Gareth stared at the scars, then at her face. I am not as strong as you. Strength has nothing to do with it. It is about stubbornness and refusing to give up. She pulled her sleeve back down. But perhaps you are right. Perhaps you prefer the solitude and the excuses it provides. Her words stung because they held truth. Gareth had retreated to this isolated farm not just because of his injury, but because it was easier to be alone than to face the pity and judgment of others. Easier to blame his damaged shoulder than to admit he was afraid of trying and failing. I am sorry, Thura said quietly. That was unkind. Your struggles are not mine to judge. No, you are right. Gareth rubbed his left shoulder, feeling the familiar ache. I have been hiding here, pretending it is by choice when really I am just afraid. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Thura reached across the table and touched his hand briefly, a fleeting contact that sent warmth through his entire arm. Fear is not weakness, she said. Everyone is afraid of something. The question is whether we let that fear control us. Gareth met her eyes and saw understanding there, genuine connection. In that moment, something shifted between them, a wall coming down that neither had realized they were building. He turned his hand over, catching hers before she could pull away. Thank you, he said quietly, for your honesty. And for not treating me like an invalid. Thura's fingers tightened around his for just a second before she withdrew. We should eat before the food gets cold. They finished lunch in more comfortable silence, and afterward Thura returned to her mending while Gareth ventured outside to check the animals and survey the storm damage. Several fence posts had come loose, and there were broken branches scattered across the yard. He set about cleaning up, working slowly to accommodate his shoulder. He was dragging a fallen branch toward the woodpile when Thura emerged from the cottage. She had changed the bandage on her leg and moved with barely a limp now. Let me help, she said, reaching for one end of the branch. You should rest your leg. My leg is fine, and this work is too much for one person, especially one with an injured shoulder. She lifted the branch easily, her orc strength evident. Together they carried it to the woodpile. See, much easier with two. They worked side by side for the next hour, clearing debris and making repairs. Gareth found himself constantly aware of Thura's presence, the way she moved with efficient grace, the sound of her breathing as she lifted heavy branches. She was strong, far stronger than any human woman, but she was also careful and precise in her movements. There was no wasted effort, no clumsy fumbling. Everything she did was purposeful and competent. When they finished, the yard looked better than it had in weeks. Gareth wiped sweat from his brow despite the cold air and surveyed their work with satisfaction. "Thank you," he said. "That would have taken me days on my own. Then it is good I was here to help." Thura stretched, rolling her shoulders. "I am not accustomed to sitting still for long. The sewing is my trade, but I grew up doing farm work as well. It feels good to use my muscles." They returned to the cottage as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Gareth prepared dinner while Thura finished mending the last of his damaged clothes. The domesticity of the scene struck him forcefully. It had been years since he shared a meal with anyone, years since another person's presence made his cottage feel less empty. He had told himself he preferred solitude, but now he wondered if he had simply been afraid to admit how lonely he truly was. "Tell me about your clan," he said as they ate. "What is life like in the Orc territories?" Thura looked surprised by the question. "Why do you wish to know?" "Because I realize I know nothing about orcs except how to fight them, and I am tired of ignorance." She considered this, then began to speak. "My clan lives in the northern mountains in a valley much like this one. We farm, hunt, raise livestock. We have families, friends, celebrations, and sorrows. We are not so different from humans in many ways." "Then why did we go to war?" "Why does anyone go to war? Resources, territory, old grudges that no one remembers the source of." Thura's voice was weary. "My grandmother said there was a time when humans and orcs traded peacefully. Then something happened, borders were drawn, and suddenly we were enemies. The hatred has been passed down through generations, growing stronger with each conflict." "You hate humans?" Gareth asked quietly. Thura was silent for a long time. "I did," she finally said. "During the war, I hated all humans. I lost my father and 2 brothers to human soldiers. I wanted revenge, wanted to hurt those who had hurt my family. But after the war ended and I had time to think, I realized the human soldiers who killed my family were just following orders, just like I would have been if my clan had sent me to fight. They were not monsters. They were people protecting their own families and territories." "I am sorry for your losses," Gareth said, meaning it. "War takes too much from everyone." "Yes, it does." Thura met his eyes across the table. "But perhaps something good can come from the ruins. Perhaps people like us who have seen the cost of hatred can choose a different path." "Is that why you are traveling alone to human territories? To choose a different path?" "Partly. And partly because my clan needs the trade income to survive. Someone had to try, and I volunteered." She smiled slightly, a sad expression. "My mother was not pleased. She fears I will be killed or worse. But I could not sit idle while my people struggled." Gareth felt a surge of admiration for her courage. Traveling alone through hostile territory, risking violence and death for the sake of her clan. It was more bravery than he had managed in the 2 years since the war ended. "You will make it to Millbrook," he said with certainty. "And they will trade with you. How could they refuse when your work is so skilled? You are kind to say so, but I am not so confident." Thura pushed her empty bowl away. "Humans see an orc and think monster, savage, enemy. They do not see the seamstress or the daughter or the person. They only see the green skin and tusks. Then they are fools." The words came out more vehemently than Gareth intended. "You are more than your skin or tusks. You are intelligent, skilled, brave. Anyone who cannot see that is willfully blind." Thura stared at him, something vulnerable and surprised in her expression. "You truly believe that?" I do." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the table. The cottage felt very small suddenly, the space between them charged with an emotion Gareth could not quite name. His heart was beating faster, and he felt heat rise to his face. Thura's dark eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted as if she wanted to speak but could not find the words. The moment stretched and then broke as Thura stood abruptly. "I should check my pack, make sure everything is dry for tomorrow's journey." "Right, of course." Gareth stood as well, suddenly awkward. "I will prepare the barn for you." "That is not necessary, I insist. The least I can do after you mended all my clothes." He fled the cottage before she could argue further, his mind reeling. What had just happened? That moment of connection, of seeing and being seen, had shaken something loose inside him. He realized with startling clarity that he was attracted to Thura, drawn to her strength and competence, and the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. But she was an orc, and he was human, and the gulf between them was far wider than the table they had shared in the barn. He prepared fresh hay and made sure the blankets were clean and dry. The sheep watched him with placid eyes, unconcerned with the turmoil churning through his thoughts. When he returned to the cottage, Thura was at the table again, her pack neatly organized beside her. "The barn is ready," he said. "Thank you." She did not meet his eyes. "For everything. You have shown me more kindness than I expected to find in human lands. You have given me more than I gave you. The mending alone is worth far more than 2 nights' shelter. Then perhaps we are even. Perhaps." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, then Thura gathered her pack and headed for the door. She paused on the threshold, looking back at him. "Gareth Quinn, you are a good man. I hope you find peace with yourself and your injury. You deserve better than loneliness and pain." Before he could respond, she was gone, disappearing into the darkness toward the barn. Gareth stood in the empty cottage, feeling the loneliness settle over him like a heavy cloak. Tomorrow she would leave, and he would return to his isolated existence. The thought filled him with unexpected grief. He slept poorly that night, tossing and turning as wind rattled the shutters. His dreams were confused, mixing memories of war with images of Thura's face, her dark eyes and proud bearing. He woke before dawn feeling unrested and out of sorts. When he finally dragged himself from bed and prepared breakfast, he found himself making extra, as he had the previous 2 mornings. But when he went to the barn to bring Thura her share, he found it empty. Her blankets were neatly folded, the hay smoothed as if no one had slept there. She was gone, vanished sometime in the early morning hours without saying goodbye. Gareth stood in the empty barn, holding the bowl of porridge he had prepared, and felt the loss like a physical blow. He had known she would leave, had expected it, but somehow the reality was harder than the anticipation. He returned to the cottage and ate alone, the silence oppressive after 2 days of shared meals and quiet conversation. The day stretched endlessly before him. He tried to work, to fall back into his usual routine, but everything felt hollow and pointless. He found himself looking toward the road, half hoping to see Thura returning, knowing it was foolish. She had her own path to follow, her own responsibilities. Their time together had been an accident, a brief respite from their separate struggles. It meant nothing. Except it had meant something to him. In 2 short days, Thura had challenged him, inspired him, made him feel less alone. She had seen him not as a broken soldier but as a person capable of kindness and growth. And he had seen her not as an enemy, but as a brave, intelligent woman trying to build a better future for her people. He was examining the coat she had mended, marveling again at the invisible stitching, when he heard hoofbeats on the road. Gareth's first thought was that Thura had returned, but orcs did not typically ride horses. He went to the window and felt his stomach drop. 3 riders approached his cottage, and he recognized them immediately. Marcus Quinby and his sons, farmers from the neighboring valley. They were not friends, but they were not enemies either, just occasional trading partners who shared news and sometimes helped with large projects like barn raising or harvest. But the expressions on their faces now were hard and suspicious. Gareth went outside to meet them, his pulse quickening. "Marcus, what brings you out this way?" The older man dismounted, his sons staying on their horses. "Heard tell there was an orc seen in these parts. Big female with a pack heading north. You seen anything like that?" Gareth's mind raced. If he admitted to sheltering Thura, there would be consequences. Marcus was known for his hatred of orcs, had lost a nephew in the war, but lying felt wrong, a betrayal of what Thura represented. "Why would an orc be traveling through here?" Gareth asked, deflecting. "That is what we are trying to figure." Marcus's eyes were sharp, searching. "Some folks in town said they saw tracks near your property. Big ones, heavier than a human, so I will ask again. Have you seen an orc woman?" Gareth met his gaze steadily. "I saw a traveler pass through 2 days ago during the storm. Asked for directions to Millbrook. I pointed the way and they moved on." One of Marcus's sons, a burly young man named Gregory, leaned forward in his saddle. "You did not get a good look. It was raining and nearly dark." "I saw someone with a pack. They asked for directions. I provided them. That is all." Marcus studied him for a long moment, clearly not entirely convinced. "This traveler, they did not come onto your property, did not ask for shelter. They asked only for directions." It was not technically a lie, Gareth told himself. Thura had asked for directions first. The fact that he had offered shelter afterward was a separate matter. "Well, if you do see an orc, you send word immediately," Marcus said, his tone making it clear he suspected Gareth was not telling the whole truth. "These are dangerous times. Orcs have no business in human lands. If one is traveling alone, she is up to no good." "I will keep that in mind," Gareth said evenly. Marcus remounted his horse, still watching Gareth with narrowed eyes. "You have changed since the war, Quinn. Become secretive. Folks in town wonder what you get up to out here all alone." "I farm and mind my own business." "Perhaps others should do the same. Just a friendly warning. People are watching, especially now with tension still high between our kind and theirs." Marcus turned his horse. "You take care now." They rode off, and Gareth watched them go with clenched fists. His heart was pounding, and he felt sick with the realization of how close that had been. If they had arrived yesterday, they would have found Thura in his barn. There would have been violence, possibly death. The thought of Thura being hurt or killed because of misguided hatred made his blood run cold. He returned to the cottage and tried to work, but his mind kept returning to Thura. Was she safe? Had she made it far enough that Marcus and his sons would not catch up to her? The road to Millbrook passed through rough country, perfect for an ambush if someone was determined to stop an orc traveler. The day wore on into evening, and Gareth's anxiety grew rather than diminished. He told himself there was nothing he could do, that Thura was capable and strong and could take care of herself. But the worry gnawed at him until he could no longer ignore it. As the sun set, Gareth made a decision that would have seemed insane just a week ago. He gathered supplies, packed food and water, strapped on the sword he had not worn since returning from the war, and set out on the road north toward Millbrook. If Marcus and his sons were hunting Thura, they would have to go through him first. The journey was hard on his shoulder, and he had to stop frequently to rest. But he pushed himself onward, driven by fear for Thura's safety and something deeper he was not ready to name. The moon rose full and bright, lighting his path through the forest. He walked through the night, pausing only briefly to catch his breath and ease the ache in his shoulder. Dawn was breaking when he heard voices ahead. Gareth slowed, approaching cautiously. Through the trees, he saw a clearing and felt his heart sink. Thura was backed against a large oak tree, her pack on the ground at her feet. Surrounding her were Marcus and his 2 sons, all armed with clubs and knives. "We told you orcs are not welcome in these lands," Marcus was saying, his voice ugly with hatred. "You should have stayed in your own territory, monster." "I am only traveling to trade," Thura said, her voice steady despite the fear Gareth could see in her eyes. "I mean no harm. You are an orc. Your kind killed my nephew. That is harm enough." Marcus raised his club. "Boys, let us teach this savage a lesson about trespassing." Gareth stepped into the clearing, his sword drawn. "That is enough." All 4 turned to stare at him in shock, Marcus's face twisted with anger. "Quinn, what are you doing here, stopping you from making a terrible mistake?" Gareth positioned himself between Thura and the 3 men. "This woman has done nothing wrong. She is a trader seeking to do business in Millbrook. Let her pass." "She is an orc," Gregory spat. "Since when do you defend orcs, Quinn? You killed enough of them during the war. The war is over." "And I am tired of killing." Gareth raised his sword slightly. "Walk away, Marcus. Take your sons and go home. There has been enough violence. You are choosing an orc over your own kind." Marcus looked genuinely bewildered. "Have you lost your mind?" "Maybe I have. Or maybe I have finally found it." Gareth's voice was calm but firm. "Either way, you are not touching her. If you want to get to her, you will have to go through me." Marcus's face flushed with rage. "Fine. If you want to die protecting an orc, that is your choice." He gestured to his sons. "Take him." The 2 younger men hesitated, clearly not eager to fight a trained soldier, even one with an injured shoulder, but their father's glare drove them forward. Gregory came at Gareth from the left while his brother Thomas approached from the right, a classic pincer movement. Gareth's body remembered the training even if his shoulder did not. He sidestepped Gregory's clumsy swing and brought the flat of his blade against the young man's back, sending him stumbling. Thomas was more cautious, circling with his knife extended. Gareth feinted left, then struck right, disarming Thomas with a quick twist of his blade, but the movements aggravated his shoulder and he felt something tear. Pain lanced through him, sharp and debilitating. He gasped, nearly dropping his sword. Marcus saw the weakness and moved in with his club raised. Before he could strike, Thura was there. She had picked up a fallen branch and swung it with devastating force, catching Marcus in the ribs and sending him flying backward. The older man hit the ground hard and lay there gasping for breath. "Leave now," Thura said, her voice cold and dangerous, "or the next blow will be to your skull." Gregory and Thomas rushed to their father's aid, helping him to his feet. Marcus clutched his ribs, his face contorted with pain and fury. "This is not over," he wheezed. "The whole valley will hear about this. You are both dead." "Then you better make sure you succeed in killing us," Gareth said, still clutching his shoulder. "Because if we survive, I will tell everyone how 3 armed men attacked an unarmed woman and were driven off. How brave that will sound." Marcus spat blood and allowed his sons to help him onto his horse. They rode off without another word, and Gareth sagged against a tree, the adrenaline draining from his body and leaving only pain. Thura was at his side immediately. "Your shoulder. Let me see." "I am fine," Gareth lied, then hissed in pain as she gently probed the injury. "You are not fine. You have torn something." She helped him sit down, easing him against the tree trunk. "Why did you come? Why did you risk yourself for me?" Gareth looked up at her, at the concern in her dark eyes, and felt something break open inside him. "Because I could not let them hurt you. Because the thought of you being harmed or killed was unbearable. Because in 2 short days, you became important to me in a way I do not fully understand. Thura's breath caught. She knelt beside him, her hand coming up to touch his face with surprising gentleness. Gareth, I know it is foolish, he continued, the words spilling out now that he had started. You are orc and I am human. There is no future for whatever this is. But I could not stay in my cottage knowing you might be in danger. I could not do nothing. You are an idiot, Thura said, but her voice was soft, almost tender. A brave, stubborn, wonderful idiot. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of intimacy that made his heart race. I left without saying goodbye because I was afraid of what I was feeling, afraid of caring for you when I knew I could not stay. Why can you not stay? Gareth asked, though he knew the answer. Because I have responsibilities to my clan. Because the world is not ready for an orc and a human to be together. Because even if we wanted to try, there is nowhere we could go that would accept us both. Then we make our own place. The idea formed as Gareth spoke it, crazy and impossible and absolutely right. My farm. It is isolated enough that no one comes by. You could stay, help me work the land. We could build something together. Thura pulled back, searching his face. You are injured and in pain. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying. I am saying I do not want to be alone anymore. I am saying 2 days with you showed me what my life has been missing. I am saying I am falling for you, and I do not care that you are an orc. He caught her hand with his good one. Stay with me, Thura, please. Tears welled in her eyes, and Gareth realized it was the first time he had seen her cry. What about my clan? They need the trade income. Bring them your work, and I will take it to Millbrook to sell. I am human. The traders will deal with me. We can build a partnership, your clan providing goods and me acting as the go-between. Everyone benefits, and you can stay. You would do that. Take such a risk. I already did when I stepped between you and Marcus. I am done hiding, done pretending I do not care about anything. You made me want to live again, Thura. I will not let you go without fighting for this. She laughed through her tears, a sound of joy and disbelief mixed together. You truly are an idiot, a wonderful, brave, impossible idiot. Then she leaned in and kissed him, her lips surprisingly soft despite her tusks. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, 2 people crossing a forbidden boundary and marveling that the world did not end. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent and desperate, years of loneliness and pain seeking solace in connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. We will face such hatred, Thura whispered, from my people and yours. Then we face it together. Gareth stood with her help, cradling his injured shoulder. But first, we need to get somewhere safe. Marcus will not give up easily, and I need medical attention before this shoulder becomes permanently damaged. There is an orc settlement half a day's walk east of here, Thura said. They will have healers who can help you, but I warn you they will not welcome a human. Will they welcome you if you bring a human? I do not know, but we have no other choice. You cannot make it back to your cottage in this condition, and Millbrook is too far. They gathered their belongings and set off through the forest, Thura supporting Gareth when the pain in his shoulder became too much. The journey was hard, every step an agony for Gareth, but Thura's presence gave him strength. She talked as they walked, telling him about her clan and the settlement they were heading toward, preparing him for what to expect. They reached the settlement as the sun was setting. It was smaller than Gareth had expected, perhaps 30 buildings clustered in a valley protected by steep hills. Orc guards spotted them immediately and rushed forward with weapons drawn. Thura, one of the guards, a massive orc male with scars covering his arms, lowered his axe in confusion. What are you doing here? And why have you brought a human? I need the healers, Korag. This man is injured and it is my fault. Please, I will explain everything, but he needs help now. Korag looked from Thura to Gareth, clearly torn between duty and concern for his clanswoman. Finally, he nodded. Take him to the healing house, but there will be questions, Thura, many questions. The settlement erupted in whispers and stares as they made their way to a long, low building near the center. Gareth felt every eye on him, felt the weight of suspicion and hatred, but Thura held her head high, supporting him with unwavering strength. The healer was an elderly orc woman named Grishka who took one look at Gareth's shoulder and clucked her tongue disapprovingly. Human bones, so fragile. Sit. She worked with surprising gentleness, manipulating Gareth's shoulder and applying pungent poultices that burned and then numbed the pain. Thura stayed by his side, holding his hand when the manipulation became particularly agonizing. Old injury, made worse by fresh stupidity, Grishka announced. The human will live, but he needs rest and proper care. The shoulder must be immobilized for several days. He can stay in my family's home, Thura said. I will care for him. Grishka's eyes narrowed. You are taking responsibility for this human. You understand what that means. I do. Then so be it, but the elders will want to speak with you both. That night, Gareth lay on a pallet in Thura's family home, his shoulder wrapped and immobilized. Thura's mother, a stern-faced woman named Korga, had received him with cold civility, clearly unhappy about a human under her roof, but unwilling to deny her daughter's request. Thura sat beside Gareth as darkness fell, applying fresh poultice as Grishka had instructed. I am sorry, she said quietly. This is not what you expected when you offered me shelter. Nothing about the last few days is what I expected, Gareth replied, but I do not regret any of it. You may regret it when you face the elders tomorrow. They will not be kind. Let them do their worst. I have faced scarier things than angry orc elders. Thura smiled slightly. You have not met our elders. The next morning, Gareth was summoned before the clan council. The elders sat in a semicircle, 5 ancient orcs whose weathered faces held the weight of decades of leadership. Thura stood beside Gareth, her presence a comfort as he faced their scrutiny. Human, the eldest, a woman whose white hair hung in a long braid, spoke. I am Elder Rasha. Explain why we should not kill you for trespassing in our settlement. Because I came here seeking help for an injury sustained while defending Thura from human attackers, Gareth said, keeping his voice steady despite his fear. And because I mean your people no harm. You are a soldier, another elder, a male with a missing eye, stated. We can see it in the way you stand, the scars you bear. How many of our kind did you kill during the war? The question was like a knife to the gut. Gareth wanted to lie to minimize, but he had promised himself honesty. Many. I fought for 4 years on the border. I killed orc warriors who were trying to kill me and my fellow soldiers. I'm not proud of it, but I will not deny it either. And now you claim to care for Thura. How convenient. The third elder, a woman with ritualistic scars on her cheeks, leaned forward. Perhaps you seek to use her, to gain access to our settlement for nefarious purposes. I seek nothing but to build a life with her, Gareth said firmly. I know I have no right to ask for your acceptance or trust. But I love Thura, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of her if you give me the chance. The elders exchanged glances, communicating in some way Gareth could not interpret. Thura stepped forward, her voice strong. I claim this human as my mate, she said, using formal language that made Gareth's heart race. I take responsibility for his actions and vouch for his character. He has shown me kindness when he had every reason to turn me away. He risked his life to protect me from human attackers. He is not perfect, but he is honest and brave and good. I ask the council to accept him into our clan." The elders were silent for a long moment. Then Elder Rasha spoke. "This is unprecedented. A human has never been accepted into an orc clan. The implications are significant." "I understand," Thura said. "But the war is over, and we must find new ways forward. Gareth offers us an opportunity. He has a farm land that borders both human and orc territories. He can act as a trader for our goods, selling them in human markets where we would not be welcomed. This benefits the entire clan. And what does he get in return?" the one-eyed elder asked. "Beyond access to you, that is." "He gets a partner," Thura said. "Someone to help work his land, to share his life. He gets to be part of something larger than himself. And he gets my love, which I give freely." Gareth felt his throat tighten with emotion. Hearing Thura speak of love so openly before her entire clan was overwhelming. He wanted to speak, to add his own declaration, but knew this moment belonged to her. Elder Rasha stood, and the other elders rose with her. "We will deliberate. You will have our decision by nightfall." The rest of the day passed in agonizing slowness. Thura showed Gareth around the settlement, introducing him to her family and friends. The reception was mixed. Some orcs were openly hostile, refusing to even look at him. Others were curious, asking questions about human customs and life. A few, mostly younger orcs who had lost less in the war, were cautiously welcoming. Thura's mother remained distant but civil. Over a midday meal, she finally spoke directly to Gareth. "My daughter sees something in you," Korga said. "I do not yet see it myself, but I trust her judgment. If you hurt her, if you betray her trust, there is nowhere you can hide that I will not find you. Understand?" "I understand," Gareth said, "and I swear to you I would rather die than hurt Thura." Korga studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "See that you remember that oath." As evening approached, they were summoned back before the council. Gareth's heart pounded as he stood before the elders, Thura's hand clasped in his. Elder Rasha looked at them both with an unreadable expression. "The council has decided," she announced. "We will allow the human, Gareth Quinn, to join our clan on a trial basis. For one full turning of the seasons, he will live among us, learn our ways, and prove his worth. If at the end of that time he has demonstrated his commitment and value to the clan, he will be accepted as a full member. If not, he will be exiled, and Thura must choose between him and her people." It was not a complete victory, but it was more than Gareth had dared hope for. He bowed deeply. "Thank you, honored elders. I will not disappoint you." "See that you do not," the one-eyed elder said. "And understand this, human. We accept you only because Thura vouches for you. Her reputation is now tied to yours. If you fail, she suffers as well. Can you live with that responsibility?" "I can," Gareth said firmly. "And I will not fail." The elders dismissed them, and Thura led Gareth out of the council house. Once they were alone, she threw her arms around him, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. "We have a chance," she whispered. "A real chance to be together." "1 year," Gareth said, holding her with his good arm. "1 year to prove myself. I can do that." "We can do that," Thura corrected. Together. The following days established a new routine. Gareth's shoulder healed slowly under Grishka's care, and he began learning the ways of the orc clan. It was harder than he had anticipated. The language was difficult, full of guttural sounds his human throat struggled to produce. The customs were unfamiliar, and he committed countless small violations of etiquette that made the orcs around him wince. But Thura was patient, teaching him with gentle corrections and encouragement. And gradually, Gareth began to understand the rhythm of orc life. He learned that orcs valued directness and honesty above politeness, that they prized skill and competence over empty words. He learned their songs and stories, their history of struggle and survival in harsh mountain lands. He also began to work, contributing to the clan despite his injured shoulder. He could not do heavy labor, but he could help with other tasks. He assisted the leather workers, the potters, the weavers. His soldiers' discipline and attention to detail earned grudging respect from some of the craftspeople. Thura continued her seamstress work, and Gareth marveled at watching her ply her trade. She was an artist with needle and thread, creating not just functional clothing but beautiful pieces adorned with intricate embroidery. One evening, she presented him with a new shirt, deep blue with silver thread forming patterns along the collar and cuffs. "For you," she said shyly. "So you have something fine to wear." Gareth examined the stitching, seeing symbols he was beginning to recognize: protection, strength, love. "It is beautiful, Thura, too fine for someone like me." "It is exactly right for you." She helped him put it on, her hands lingering on his shoulders. "You are not just a broken soldier, Gareth. You are my partner, my mate. You deserve beautiful things." He pulled her close, kissing her softly. Their relationship had deepened in the weeks since arriving at the settlement. They shared a sleeping space now, and while they had not yet consummated their bond, the intimacy between them grew daily. Gentle touches, stolen kisses, quiet conversations late into the night. Gareth had never felt so connected to another person. As winter settled over the mountains, Gareth's shoulder improved enough that he could begin more substantial work. He helped repair buildings damaged by storms, using carpentry skills learned from his father. The orcs were impressed by his knowledge of construction techniques, and he found himself leading small projects one day. As he was overseeing the repair of a storage shed, Korag approached. The scarred warrior who had first challenged Gareth's presence now worked alongside him occasionally, their relationship evolving from hostility to grudging respect. "You are not useless for a human," Korag said, which Gareth had learned was high praise from the taciturn warrior. "Thank you." "You are not terrible for an orc who wanted to kill me when we met." Korag barked a laugh. "I still might kill you if you hurt Thura." "Fair enough. I would deserve it." They worked in silence for a while, then Korag spoke again. "The clan is beginning to accept you, not all but many. They see you work hard, see you treat Thura with respect and love. It matters." "I am glad to hear it. I want to belong here, to be worthy of Thura and your clan." "Then keep doing what you are doing, and learn to fight properly. That shoulder may be weak, but you can still train your left arm. An orc's mate must be able to defend themselves and their family." Gareth considered this. "Would you teach me? I know human fighting styles, but orc combat is different." Korag grinned, showing his tusks. "I thought you would never ask." Training with Korag was brutal. The orc warrior showed no mercy, pushing Gareth to his limits and beyond. But slowly, Gareth's left arm grew stronger, compensating for his weakened right shoulder. He learned to fight with an axe, the weapon of choice for orc warriors, and found it suited his style better than a sword. Thura watched his training sessions with pride and occasionally joined in, revealing herself to be a skilled fighter in her own right. Gareth learned that she had served as a scout during the war, using her intelligence and stealth rather than brute force. Sparring with her was different from fighting Korag, requiring finesse and strategy rather than raw power. Winter deepened, and the clan prepared for the long, cold months ahead. Food was preserved, firewood stockpiled, buildings reinforced against snow and wind. Gareth threw himself into the work, determined to prove his value. During the long winter nights, he sat with the elders and learned clan history, committing names and lineages to memory. He also began planning for the future. When spring came, he would need to return to his farm to plant crops and prepare for the trading season. The elders had agreed that he could serve as the clan's trading agent, selling their goods in Millbrook and other human settlements. It would be dangerous, balancing between two worlds, but Gareth was determined to make it work. One particularly cold night, as Gareth and Thura lay together under thick firs, she spoke quietly. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Of what?" "That this will not last. That something will happen to tear us apart. The world is not kind to those who cross boundaries." Gareth pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I know. I am afraid too. But I would rather have this, even if it is temporary, than spend my life alone wondering what could have been." "Do you truly love me?" Thura asked. "Or is this just loneliness seeking comfort?" "I love you," Gareth said without hesitation. "I love your strength and your skill. I love the way you see the world, direct and honest. I love your courage and your kindness. I love waking up beside you and falling asleep in your arms. I love everything about you, Thura, and I will keep loving you for the rest of my life." She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in the Orcish language, words he had learned over the months. "Kreshna Dor, Gareth Quinn. Kreshna Dor Ithmora, my heart, my forever." "Kreshna Dor," Gareth repeated, the words awkward in his mouth but sincere. "Ithmora." They made love that night for the first time, a slow and tender joining that left them both breathless and overwhelmed. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Gareth felt a completeness he had never known existed. This was what he had been missing all those lonely years on his isolated farm. Not just physical intimacy, but true connection with another soul. Spring came slowly to the mountains, snow giving way reluctantly to green shoots and rushing streams. Gareth's trial period was more than half over, and he could feel the clan's acceptance growing. He was no longer viewed as a threat or an outsider, but as a member of the community, albeit an unusual one. But challenges remained. A delegation of orc warriors from a neighboring clan arrived, bringing news that human settlements were expanding again, pushing into territories that orcs claimed. There was talk of renewed conflict, of the fragile peace collapsing under the weight of old hatreds. Gareth attended the council meeting where the delegation presented their case. The warriors argued for preemptive strikes against human settlements, for reclaiming land they viewed as stolen. Elder Rasha listened gravely, then turned to Gareth. "You are human," she said. "Explain to us why your people cannot honor the borders agreed upon at the war's end." Gareth stood, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. "I cannot speak for all humans, honored elder. But I know that greed and fear drive many actions. Some humans fear orcs and want a buffer zone. Others see unclaimed land and wish to expand their holdings. They do not think about the consequences or the orc clans who depend on that land. Then they are fools," one of the visiting warriors spat. "And fools must be taught harsh lessons. More violence will only breed more violence," Gareth argued. "If you attack human settlements, they will retaliate. Then we are back in full war and everyone suffers. What do you suggest, human? That we simply allow your people to steal our land?" "No. I suggest we use trade and diplomacy instead of war. I have been planning to establish myself as a trading agent between this clan and human settlements. Let me expand that role. I can speak to the settlers, explain that this land is claimed and used by orc clans. I can negotiate boundaries and trading agreements, give peace a chance before resorting to violence." The visiting warriors scoffed, but Elder Rasher raised her hand for silence. "The human speaks sense. Gareth Quinn, if we grant you authority to negotiate on our behalf, what guarantee do we have that you will not betray us to your own kind?" Only my word and my actions over the past months, Gareth said honestly. I cannot prove loyalty beyond what I have already shown. But I love Thura, and I have made a life here among you. Why would I betray the people who have become my family? The council deliberated for hours. Finally, they agreed to give Gareth's plan a chance. He would travel to the expanding settlements with a small delegation of orc warriors and attempt to negotiate. If he failed, the clans would consider military action. Thura insisted on being part of the delegation. I am not letting you face this alone, she said firmly. We are partners. Where you go, I go. Korag also volunteered along with 2 other warriors. They set out a week later, traveling south toward the disputed territories. The journey took 5 days, and they saw signs of recent human activity everywhere. New farms carved out of forest land, fresh-cut lumber piled beside half-built structures, survey markers indicating future expansion. When they reached the largest of the new settlements, a place called Riverside, they were met with fear and hostility. The settlers saw orcs and reached for weapons. Only Gareth's presence, a human among the orcs, gave them pause. We come to talk, not fight, Gareth called out. I am Gareth Quinn, and I speak on behalf of the northern orc clans. We need to discuss the land you are settling. The settlers' leader, a hard-faced woman named Olivia Randall, agreed to meet with them. In a tense gathering at the settlement's meeting hall, Gareth explained the situation. The land they were settling was used by orc clans for hunting and gathering, vital to their survival. Continued expansion would force conflict. These orcs could wipe out your settlement if they chose to, Gareth said bluntly. They have not done so because they prefer peace, but there are limits to patience. Work with us to establish clear boundaries. Trade with the orc clans. Everyone benefits. Olivia was skeptical. Why should we trust orcs? They were our enemies just 2 years ago. They were, and you were theirs. But the war is over, and holding on to old hatreds will only lead to more death. Gareth gestured to Thura. This is my mate, Thura. She is a skilled seamstress, and her clan produces goods of exceptional quality. Imagine having access to such craftsmanship. Imagine trading peacefully instead of fighting constantly. The negotiations were difficult and contentious. But slowly, with Gareth mediating between the 2 groups, agreements began to form. Boundaries were drawn, with certain areas designated for orc use and others for human settlement. Trading arrangements were established, with Gareth serving as the initial go-between until trust could be built. When they returned to the orc settlement 2 weeks later, Gareth and his delegation brought signed agreements and samples of trade goods the humans wanted to purchase. Elder Rasha examined the documents carefully. You have done well, Gareth Quinn, she said. Better than I expected. Perhaps there is hope for peace after all. The success of the Riverside negotiations changed everything. Other settlements began reaching out, seeking similar agreements. Gareth found himself traveling constantly, negotiating boundaries and trade deals. Thura accompanied him on many trips, her presence reminding both sides that orcs and humans could work together. Their relationship became known throughout the region, a symbol of reconciliation to some and an abomination to others. They faced harassment and threats from extremists on both sides. But they also found unexpected allies, people who were tired of conflict and willing to embrace a new way forward. As Gareth's trial year with the orc clan drew to a close, he realized he had built something extraordinary. Not just a life with Thura, but a bridge between 2 peoples who had been enemies for generations. His farm became a neutral meeting ground where humans and orcs could trade and talk without fear. The goods produced by Thura's clan found eager buyers in human markets, bringing prosperity to the settlement. On the anniversary of his arrival at the orc settlement, the clan held a great gathering. Gareth stood before the council, his heart pounding. This was the moment of judgment, when the elders would decide whether to accept him fully or cast him out. Elder Rasha spoke, her ancient voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Gareth Quinn, human, you have lived among us for one full turning of the seasons. You have worked hard, learned our ways, and brought value to our clan. You have proven yourself worthy of Thura's love and our acceptance. The council has decided to grant you full membership in our clan, with all rights and responsibilities that entails." Relief and joy flooded through Gareth. Thura grabbed his hand, her face radiant with happiness. The clan erupted in celebration, even those who had been skeptical of the human joining in the festivities. That night, under the stars, Gareth and Thura stood together at the edge of the settlement. Below them, the valley where Gareth's farm sat was visible, a patchwork of fields and forest. "We did it," Thura said softly. "We actually did it." "We are not done yet," Gareth replied. "There is still so much work to do, so many people to convince, so many challenges ahead." "I know. But we will face them together." She turned to him, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "I love you, Gareth Quinn, my strange, stubborn, wonderful human. I love you, Thura, my fierce, beautiful, amazing mate." They kissed under the stars, two people from different worlds who had found each other and chosen love over hatred, hope over despair. Around them, the celebration continued, music and laughter filling the night air. In the months that followed, Gareth and Thura split their time between the orc settlement and Gareth's farm. They expanded the farm, building additional structures to house visiting traders and storage for goods. Thura's seamstress work flourished, and she began training young orcs and interested humans in her craft, creating a new generation of skilled artisans. The trading network Gareth had established grew beyond his initial vision. More orc clans and human settlements joined, creating an interconnected economy that made peace profitable for everyone. Old enemies found themselves working side by side, and while tensions remained, they were managed through negotiation rather than violence. Gareth's shoulder never fully healed, but he learned to work within its limitations. With Thura's help and the strength he built through training with Korag, he was able to do most farm work and defend himself when necessary. The nightmares that had plagued him since the war gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the future he was building with Thura. 2 years after Thura had first appeared in his yard asking for directions, Gareth stood in the same spot with very different emotions. He was preparing to host a gathering of traders, both human and orc, who would spend 3 days at the farm negotiating deals and sharing knowledge. It was an event that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. Thura emerged from the cottage they now shared, carrying a basket of her latest work. She had sewn matching vests for them, deep green with intricate silver embroidery that combined human and orc design elements. The symbolism was clear. 2 cultures, 2 peoples, joined in harmony. "Are you ready?" she asked, handing him his vest, "As ready as I will ever be." Gareth slipped on the vest, admiring the craftsmanship. "You have outdone yourself, love. This is beautiful, only the best for my mate." Thura adjusted his collar, then stepped back to admire her work. "We have come so far, Gareth. Sometimes I can hardly believe this is real." "It is real. We made it real through stubbornness and love and refusing to accept the hatred others tried to impose on us." The first traders began arriving in the afternoon. Gareth greeted them warmly, human and orc alike, making introductions and facilitating conversations. Thura moved through the crowd with grace and confidence, her position as a respected artisan, and Gareth's mate granting her authority in both communities. As evening fell and the trading gave way to socializing, Gareth found himself standing with Corag and Marcus Quinby, of all people. The confrontation that had brought Gareth and Thura together had eventually led to reconciliation. Marcus, facing social pressure after attacking an unarmed traveler, had been forced to participate in reconciliation efforts. To everyone's surprise, he had eventually become a genuine supporter of orc-human trade. "Never thought I would be drinking with orcs," Marcus admitted, raising his mug. "But never thought a lot of things that have happened in the last couple years." "Life is full of surprises," Corag rumbled. "Some pleasant, some not, but this." He gestured at the gathering. "This is good. My clan is prosperous. My children have full bellies. That is what matters." Marcus nodded slowly. "I still miss my nephew. The war took too much from all of us, but I am trying to honor his memory by building peace instead of perpetuating hatred." It was a small moment, 3 people from different backgrounds finding common ground. But it represented the larger change happening across the region. Old wounds were healing, slowly and imperfectly, but healing nonetheless. Later that night, after the traders had retired to their tents and the farm was quiet, Gareth and Thura sat on the porch of their cottage. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the night air was filled with the sounds of crickets and distant owls. "I have something to tell you," Thura said, her voice soft but excited. Gareth turned to her, noting the particular glow in her expression. "What is it?" "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Gareth stared at Thura, processing the words, then joy exploded through him. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close and careful all at once. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Thura asked, though she must have seen the answer on his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am terrified and thrilled and overwhelmed and so incredibly in love with you." He pulled back to look at her. "How long have you known?" "A few weeks. I wanted to be certain before telling you." She placed his hand on her belly, though there was no visible sign yet. "Our child, Gareth, a bridge between our peoples in flesh and blood." "They will face challenges," Gareth said quietly. "Being neither fully human nor fully orc, some will hate them for existing, and some will love them fiercely." Thura covered his hand with hers. "We will teach them to be strong, to be proud of their heritage from both sides, and we will surround them with people who choose love over hatred." "Yes," Gareth agreed. "We will." He kissed her softly. "Thank you, Thura, for coming into my life, for seeing something worth saving in a broken soldier, for mending not just my coat, but everything else that was torn in my life." Thura laughed, the sound full of joy. "I only came to mend a coat. You did the rest yourself. We did it together. That is what matters." They sat together under the stars. 2 people who had crossed boundaries that were supposed to be uncrossable, who had built love where there should have been only hatred. Their child would be born into a world still struggling with prejudice and fear, but also a world where change was possible, where the old hatreds did not have to define the future. 9 months later, in the depths of winter, Thura gave birth to a daughter. She had her mother's green skin and pointed ears, her father's brown eyes and softer features. They named her Kira, which meant hope in the Orcish language. She was small and perfect and absolutely adored by both the Orc clan and the human traders who had become part of their extended community. Gareth held his daughter in his arms and marveled at the miracle of her existence. Just 3 years earlier, he had been alone and broken, unable to mend even his own coat. Now he had a mate he loved beyond measure, a child who represented the future he was fighting to build, and a community that spanned the divide between humans and orcs. The torn coat still hung in the cottage, preserved as a reminder of where everything had begun. Sometimes Gareth would look at it and marvel at how a simple request for mending had transformed his entire life. Thura had mended the coat with her skilled hands, but in doing so, she had mended something far more important. She had mended his heart, his hope, his faith in the possibility of connection and love. As Kira grew, she became a symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over fear. Other mixed families began to emerge, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. The trading network Gareth had established expanded into cultural exchanges, with humans and orcs learning each other's languages, sharing meals, forming friendships and partnerships. It was not perfect. There were still incidents of violence, still communities that clung to old hatreds. But the tide was turning, and Gareth and Thura were at the center of that change. Their farm became more than just a trading post. It became a sanctuary for those who believed in a better future, a place where the impossible happened every day. 5 years after Thura had first appeared in his yard, Gareth stood at the edge of his property with his family. Thura held their daughter Kira, now a bright and curious 5-year-old, while their infant son Bren slept in a sling across Gareth's chest. They were watching a new barn being raised, built through the combined efforts of human and orc workers who laughed and sweated together under the autumn sun. "You ever regret it?" Thura asked quietly. "The complications our relationship has brought into your life?" Gareth looked at her, at their children, at the community they had built. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything I did not know I needed. Purpose, love, family, hope. I was dying in that cottage, slowly withering from loneliness and pain. You saved me, Thura." "We saved each other," she corrected. "I was lost when I came to your door, literally and figuratively. You gave me a home, a partner, a future I never dreamed possible." Kira tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, can I go help with the barn, may I?" Thura corrected gently. "And yes, but stay where we can see you and listen to the workers." They watched their daughter run toward the construction site, where both human and orc workers greeted her warmly. She was completely comfortable in both worlds, code switching between languages and customs with the ease of a child who had never known there was supposed to be a division. "She is going to change the world," Gareth said softly. "She already is," Thura replied. "Just by existing, just by being loved by both our peoples. She is proof that the boundaries we thought were absolute are actually just lines we drew ourselves, lines we can erase if we choose to." As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Gareth felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with a torn coat and a desperate orc woman asking for directions had led to this. A family, a community, a future built on hope instead of hatred. He thought about the Gareth who had existed before Thura, that lonely, broken soldier who could not even mend his own clothes. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. Thura had not just mended his coat. She had mended his spirit, given him reason to believe in himself and the world again. And he had done the same for her, he realized. When Thura had knocked on his door, she had been running from violence, uncertain whether the trading mission she had undertaken would succeed, doubting whether there was any place for her in a world divided by old hatreds. Together, they had created that place, built it with their own hands and hearts. The barn raising finished as the last light faded from the sky, and the workers gathered around a bonfire to share food and stories. Gareth and Thura joined them, their children safely nestled between them. Songs were sung in both human and orcish languages, stories told that made everyone laugh and occasionally tear up. Korag approached, now a close friend as well as Thura's clansman. "Your children are strong," he said to Gareth. "You have raised them well." "Thura deserves most of the credit," Gareth replied. "I just try to keep up." "You do more than keep up, human. You have built something remarkable here, a place where my people and yours can meet as equals, as friends. That is no small thing." "It is what the world should be," Gareth said. "What it could be if more people tried. Then we must make sure your children and mine inherit a world where they can continue this work." Korag clapped Gareth on the shoulder with enough force to make him stagger. "You are brother to me now, Gareth Quinn. Not just through Thura, but through your own merit." It was the highest compliment an orc could give, and Gareth felt his throat tighten with emotion. "The honor is mine, brother." As the celebration continued, Gareth held Thura close and watched the firelight play across the faces around them. Humans and orcs sitting together in peace, sharing food and friendship. It was not the world he had grown up in, not the world the war had tried to create. It was something new, something better, something worth fighting for. And at the center of it all was Thura, his mate, his partner, the seamstress who had come to mend his torn coat and ended up mending everything else in his life. Their love had seemed impossible, forbidden, doomed to fail. But they had proven that love was stronger than hatred, that hope could overcome fear, that two people from different worlds could build a bridge between them if they were brave enough to try. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new victories. Gareth's farm grew into a small village, a thriving community of humans and orcs who had chosen to live and work together. Trade networks expanded across the entire region, bringing prosperity and peace. More mixed families emerged, each one a testament to the possibility of reconciliation and love. Gareth's hair began to gray, and his shoulder, while stronger than it had been, never completely healed. But he did not mind. The aches and pains of age and old injury were small prices to pay for the life he had built. On quiet evenings, he would sit on the porch with Thura, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, and marvel at how far they had come. The torn coat still hung in the cottage, carefully preserved behind glass now. It had become something of a relic, a reminder of the day that changed everything. Visitors to the farm, both human and orc, would ask to see it and hear the story of how a simple act of kindness had sparked a revolution. Gareth would tell the story, though it always made him a bit uncomfortable being treated as some kind of hero. "I was just a lonely man who offered shelter to a stranger," he would say. "Thura did all the hard work." And Thura would laugh and say, "I just mended a coat. You mended an entire world." But they both knew the truth. They had mended each other, two broken people finding wholeness through love and partnership. And in healing themselves, they had shown others that healing was possible, that the wounds of war and hatred could be overcome if people chose understanding over fear. As Gareth entered his final years, he could look back on his life with profound satisfaction. He had fought in a terrible war and emerged broken. But he had been given a second chance, an opportunity to choose a different path. And that path had led him to Thura, to their children and grandchildren, to a community that embodied his deepest hopes for a better world. On an autumn evening remarkably similar to the day Thura had first appeared in his yard, Gareth sat on his porch, wrapped in a blanket. His breathing was labored, his body finally giving out after decades of hard work and harder living. Thura sat beside him, her own hair streaked with gray but her hand as strong as ever in his. "You remember the first time we met?" Gareth asked, his voice soft. "Every detail," Thura replied. "You were standing in your doorway, looking at me like you could not decide whether to help me or run away. I was terrified, an orc woman at my door, and all I could think was that the war had followed me home. And yet you helped me anyway. You offered shelter to an enemy. Why? It was a question Thura had asked many times over the years, and Gareth's answer had evolved. Because I was tired of being afraid, tired of being alone, tired of letting the war define who I was. You gave me a reason to be brave, to be kind, to be more than just a broken soldier. You were never broken, Thura said firmly. Injured, yes. Lost, perhaps, but never broken. You just needed someone to remind you of your strength. And you needed someone to appreciate yours. Gareth squeezed her hand weakly. We were perfect for each other, even when the world said we should be enemies. Especially then. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the valley they had transformed from a lonely farm to a thriving community. Children played in the street, a mix of human and orc and everything in between. The sounds of commerce and conversation filled the air, a symphony of peaceful coexistence. I love you, Gareth said. I have loved you from the moment you stood in my yard, proud and frightened and trying so hard to hide it. I will love you beyond my last breath, and whatever comes after. Tears streamed down Thura's face. And I love you, my foolish, brave, wonderful human. You took a chance on me when you had every reason not to. You built a life with me when everyone said it was impossible. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Gareth corrected. He was so tired now, his eyes heavy. Promise me you will keep the work going. Keep building bridges. Keep showing people that love is stronger than hate. I promise, Thura said, her voice breaking. Our children and grandchildren will continue what we started. Your legacy will endure, Gareth Quinn. As the last light faded from the sky, Gareth closed his eyes for the final time, a peaceful smile on his face. He died as he had lived the last decades of his life, surrounded by love, secure in the knowledge that his existence had mattered, that he had made the world better than he found it. Thura held his body as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their vows, the birth of their children. She wept for her lost mate but also smiled through her tears, grateful for every moment they had shared. The funeral was attended by hundreds, humans and orcs who had been touched by Gareth and Thura's love. They came to pay respects to a man who had chosen kindness over cruelty, love over hatred, hope over despair. And as Gareth was laid to rest in the valley he had called home, the assembled mourners sang in both languages, a harmony that would have been impossible before he and Thura had dared to love across boundaries. Thura lived many more years, continuing the work she and Gareth had begun. She taught seamstressing to anyone who wanted to learn, regardless of species. She mediated disputes, facilitated trade, and told the story of how a torn coat had changed the world. And when she finally joined Gareth in whatever lay beyond, she was laid to rest beside him, two souls who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build something beautiful together. Their village grew into a city, a shining example of what was possible when people chose unity over division. The torn coat that had started it all was displayed in a museum behind glass with a plaque that read, "This coat was mended by Thura, an orc seamstress, for Gareth Quinn, a human farmer. In mending this coat, she mended his heart, his hope, and his future." Their love reminds us that the greatest tears in our world can be healed if we have the courage to try. And so the legacy endured, generation after generation, a testament to the truth that love could bridge any divide, heal any wound, overcome any obstacle. All it took was one torn coat, one act of kindness, and two brave souls willing to choose each other when the entire world said they should not. The story of Gareth and Thura became legend, told to children of all species as a reminder that the boundaries between people were never as fixed as they seemed. That enemies could become lovers, that hatred could transform into hope, that one person's choice to mend a simple coat could ripple outward to change the entire world. And in quiet moments, when the wind blew just right through the valley, some swore they could hear laughter, the sound of two souls still together, still building their impossible dream of a world united by love.